You don't need to make a scene to make a point. In life, some exits speak louder than confrontations. Walking away silently is not a sign of weakness. It's a demonstration of emotional intelligence. Because silence is not empty. It's full of intention, discipline, and strength. We are conditioned to believe that closure requires explanation, that every departure needs justification, and that if we don't speak our minds, we're somehow allowing others to win. But the truth is, when you've outgrown a place, a person, or a mindset, staying just to explain why you're leaving only keeps you anchored to something that no longer serves your growth. Leaving silently is a discipline. It's an act of self-respect. It means you've reached a place where your peace matters more than someone else's approval. And that's not selfish, it's wise. Because the energy it takes to defend your value is often energy better spent building the future you deserve. Think about it. If someone truly understood your worth, you wouldn't need to convince them. If an environment was truly aligned with your purpose, you wouldn't feel drained in it. The moment you have to start proving your value is the moment you begin losing it. The louder you shout, the less you're heard. But when you walk away with calm, certainty, and silence, that echo stays. That silence says everything. Sometimes people don't deserve a warning. They deserve distance. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're finally prioritizing you. Because there comes a point when trying to explain your boundaries becomes another way of letting them be crossed. Leaving silently doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared deeply, but also knew when it was time to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer you a bandage. You see, growth doesn't announce itself. It moves in quiet ways. It's not always dramatic. It's strategic. The people who are building legacies, who are protecting their inner peace, who are focused on becoming, they don't have time to argue. They don't have time to justify. They don't have time to look back. And yes, it's not easy. It takes strength to walk away without closure. It takes restraint not to respond. But silence protects your dignity. It shows that you're not exiting in anger. You're evolving. You're not escaping. You're elevating. You must begin to understand the power of energy. Where it flows, life grows. So if something is no longer feeding you, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, it's costing you. And when you leave something silently, you are reclaiming that energy, redirecting it into something meaningful. So whether it's a toxic friend, a manipulative partner, a draining job, or even an old version of yourself, learn to leave gracefully, not bitter, not broken, just better. No revenge, no warning, no war, just peace. That's when they know they lost access to something real, not because you shouted, but because you stopped showing up. Let your absence be more powerful than your presence. Let your silence be louder than your words. And let your life, the way you move forward, the peace you carry, the joy you build, speak for you. Because in the end, you don't need to announce your departure to make it impactful. You just need to mean it. And then go. 5K notes of the speech. Leaving silently is not weakness. It's an act of emotional strength and self-respect. You don't owe closure to those who consistently devalue your presence. Your silence can carry more impact than any confrontation ever could. Reclaiming your energy is more valuable than winning an argument. True growth often happens quietly. No noise, no drama, just elevation. Leaving silently is not weakness. It's an act of emotional strength and self-respect. In a world that glorifies dramatic exits, loud arguments, and public declarations of boundaries, there's an understated power in simply walking away. It requires immense control, clarity, and maturity to leave without a fight, without needing to be heard, and without waiting for validation. When people hurt us, betray us, or consistently fail to value our presence, our instinct is to defend ourselves. We want them to understand what they did wrong. We want them to see our side. We want to leave them with something that stings as proof that we mattered. But emotional strength is not about proving your worth to those who didn't recognize it in the first place. It's about recognizing your own worth so deeply that you no longer feel the need to explain it. When you choose silence, you are choosing peace over chaos. You're choosing your mental and emotional well-being over temporary satisfaction. It is not easy. In fact, it is often the harder path. It is easier to explode in anger than to hold your ground in stillness. It is easier to type out a message, call them out, expose the truth. But none of that leads to healing if the other person is not ready to receive it. When you leave silently, you're not avoiding conflict, you're rising above it. You're no longer interested in proving a point because you know the point doesn't need proving. The act of walking away without noise is rooted in a deep understanding that your value is not up for debate. Silence speaks volumes. When you're silent, you're no longer participating in a cycle. You're no longer giving energy to someone who has shown time and again that they won't use it to build but to break. That's strength, not reacting when you have every reason to, not responding when your emotions are screaming to, not explaining when you already know your truth. Emotional strength is when you've cried the tears, felt the pain, but still chose not to lash out. You take the hurt and turn it inward, not as poison, but as a source of reflection. You learn from it, you sit with it, you grow through it. And eventually you move forward not with baggage, but with wisdom. Leaving silently doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared so much that you had to protect your heart. You chose not to waste your compassion on those who mishandled it. You gave what you could. You tried. You showed up, but you're not obligated to keep showing up for people who keep letting you down. And when you realize that, you begin to understand the difference between staying loyal and staying stuck. It's not your responsibility to fix someone who doesn't see anything wrong in how they treat you. It's not your job to carry the emotional weight of a relationship alone. And it's not your duty to teach someone how to appreciate you. Sometimes the lesson must come from absence. There's incredible power in being able to walk away with your head held high. You don't slam the door, you don't look back, you don't leave a trail of bitterness behind you. You simply go. And in that silence, you make one of the loudest statements of your life, that you are choosing yourself, that you are no longer settling for less than what you give, that your peace is more important than someone else's comfort, that your self-respect has finally taken priority over your need to be understood. People will notice, maybe not immediately, maybe not ever, but that's not why you do it. You don't leave silently to be missed. You leave because you've outgrown the space where your value was not seen. And when you can do that, when you can walk away without the need for recognition or revenge, you've stepped into a level of self-worth that can't be shaken. That is not weakness. That is emotional maturity at its finest. That is the quiet strength that builds legacies, that breaks generational cycles, and that ultimately leads to peace. You don't owe closure to those who consistently devalue your presence. We live in a culture that often idolizes closure. The idea that every relationship, every connection, and every departure must end with a conversation, a sit down, an exchange of final thoughts and feelings. But closure is not always mutual. Sometimes closure is not something you get from someone else. It's something you give to yourself. When people have repeatedly overlooked your value, minimized your emotions, or taken you for granted, you don't owe them a final explanation. You don't have to revisit your pain just to help them understand what they refused to see all along. The need for closure often comes from the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll finally understand your perspective, that they'll apologize, change, or finally treat you the way you deserve to be treated. But if someone didn't see your worth when you were present, they're unlikely to grasp it when you're leaving. The people who cause harm often don't think they did. They dismiss your experiences. They call you sensitive, dramatic, or too emotional. And when that's the pattern, offering them closure becomes another round of trying to justify your hurt to someone unwilling to listen. It is not your job to educate someone on how to treat you if they've had repeated chances and chose not to learn. When you constantly explain your pain to someone who refuses accountability, it becomes a cycle of emotional labor with no reward. You keep talking, they keep deflecting. You bring up facts, they bring up excuses. You expose your wounds, and they point fingers instead of offering healing. That is not closure. That is re-traumatization. That is reopening wounds in the hope that someone else will finally acknowledge them, when what you really need is to start healing them yourself. Silently leaving someone who devalued your presence is not about being cold or dismissive. It's about choosing not to reopen a door that only led to disappointment. It's about understanding that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your process, or your reasons. Especially not those who had the privilege of your presence and wasted it. You don't owe them the final word because they didn't value your first words. You don't owe them a parting gift of understanding when they consistently failed to understand you in the relationship. Giving closure to people who mistreated you is often just another way of giving them control. There is dignity in walking away quietly. There is strength in leaving without seeking validation. When you've been mistreated, you don't need to wait for someone else to acknowledge that pain in order for your healing to begin. You begin it by reclaiming your time, your voice, and your peace. That is closure. It doesn't come from the other person. It comes from the moment you decide that enough is enough, that your energy is too valuable to be spent convincing someone of your humanity. People often assume that silent departures are cold-hearted, but more often, they come from deep emotional exhaustion. After countless conversations that went nowhere, boundaries that were ignored, and feelings that were dismissed, silence becomes a form of self-protection. It's the only option left when words have lost their meaning. You've tried, you've explained, you've asked for better. But when someone consistently chooses not to listen, you have the right to choose silence. Not to hurt them, but to protect yourself. Walking away without closure may feel incomplete at first. You may feel guilt, confusion, or sadness. But those feelings are not signs that you made the wrong decision. They are evidence that you cared deeply, that you invested honestly. And now that care is being redirected inward where it belongs. Closure isn't always about answers. It's about making peace with the absence of them. It's about trusting that you don't need to understand everything to move forward. Some things are not meant to be explained. Some people are not meant to be kept. And some chapters are meant to end without a final page. You don't owe closure to those who've shown you repeatedly that they were never willing to meet you where you stood. Instead, you owe yourself the freedom to move forward without their permission. You owe yourself the space to heal without their interference. And most of all, you owe yourself the chance to choose peace over prolonged pain. Not everyone deserves to hear your goodbye. Some just deserve your silence and the distance that comes with it. Your silence can carry more impact than any confrontation ever could. When someone mistreats you, takes you for granted, or continues to disrespect your boundaries, your first instinct might be to confront them, to tell them exactly how they made you feel, to expose every detail of what they did wrong. But the truth is, not every action needs a reaction, and not every offense deserves your explanation. Sometimes silence is the most powerful statement you can make. It doesn't come from weakness. It comes from wisdom. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't need you to understand. I just need to protect my peace. When you choose silence over confrontation, you're choosing strength over chaos. You're refusing to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. Because, let's be honest, many people don't argue to listen. They argue to win. They're not looking to understand your side. They're looking to defend theirs. In those moments, talking becomes noise. Defending yourself becomes exhausting. And confrontation becomes just another battleground where your peace is the casualty. Silence, on the other hand, doesn't need to shout to be heard. It speaks in actions. It says, I know what I'm worth, and I don't have to lower myself to prove it. There is a reason why silence often feels uncomfortable. It's because it forces people to sit with the absence of your energy. When you stop responding, stop justifying, and stop engaging, people are left to face the echo of their own behavior. They start to feel the void you leave behind. And in many cases, that quiet absence does more to open their eyes than any argument ever could. Your silence forces them to deal with the reality that you are no longer available for their disrespect, their games, or their inconsistency. People tend to pay attention when you no longer react, when you no longer rise to the bait. When you stop chasing explanations and start choosing distance, that's when your value becomes undeniable. Because when you walk away without drama, you make it clear that you don't need them. You chose them. And now, you're choosing differently. That shift speaks louder than any carefully crafted monologue. It sends a message that can't be argued with that you're done. And no amount of backtracking can pull you back into something you've already outgrown. Silence is not about ignoring people or avoiding responsibility. It's about recognizing that not all battles are worth fighting. That sometimes preserving your energy is more important than proving your point. Confrontation can often become a loop. Words said in anger, responses that escalate, feelings that get tangled. But silence breaks the loop. It's a clean break, a clear boundary, and a form of strength that few are able to maintain. And the ones who are capable of that restraint often find peace faster because they're not entangled in endless attempts to be understood by those who were never listening in the first place. Silence is an act of self-respect. It says, I will not beg to be seen. I will not fight to be heard. I will not explain my worth to someone who chose to overlook it. It's about walking away when you've said all there is to say and realizing that your energy is too valuable to be wasted on someone who refuses to receive it. And while it may feel like you're leaving things unfinished, you're actually giving yourself the most complete form of closure possible, freedom. Many people confuse silence with indifference. But silence, when it comes from a place of self-awareness, is anything but indifferent. It's full of intention. It's deliberate. It's mature. It's you taking control of your narrative, choosing not to let someone else's behavior define how you respond. It's choosing dignity over drama, stillness over noise, and growth over reaction. In a world that constantly encourages us to respond, to defend, to prove, it takes courage to be quiet. It takes strength to leave unannounced. And it takes wisdom to understand that your silence might say everything they need to hear, not because you spoke it, but because you lived it. When you remove your presence, your voice, and your energy from the equation, what you're really doing is showing that you've elevated beyond the need for validation. That is power. That is impact. And that, more than any confrontation, is how real change begins. Absolutely. Here's the expanded version of the fourth keynote in 700 words. Reclaiming your energy is more valuable than winning an argument. In life, there are countless moments where we are tempted to engage in conflict. Not because we enjoy it, but because we feel the need to defend ourselves, correct the narrative, or prove a point. But the longer you stay in that cycle, the more you begin to realize that the real cost isn't the argument itself, it's your energy, it's the emotional, mental, and spiritual fuel you spend trying to be understood by people who are either incapable or unwilling to see things from your perspective. And when you finally understand this, you begin to shift your focus from being right to being well. Arguments may offer temporary satisfaction, especially when you believe you've said something powerful or delivered the final blow in a heated conversation. But what's left afterward? A drained mind, a heavy heart, and often no real change. The person may not truly listen. They may not absorb your words. In fact, they may twist them, deflect responsibility, or try to hurt you back. And then you're stuck in the same loop, giving your time and your emotional power to a situation that doesn't deserve it. But when you reclaim your energy, when you choose silence, distance, or simply walk away, you're doing something infinitely more powerful. You're saying, I refuse to keep investing in this dynamic. I value my peace more than proving you wrong. Your energy is the most valuable currency you have. It shapes your mindset, influences your decisions, and fuels your future. Every conversation you have, every thought you entertain, every relationship you maintain, they all either nourish or drain that energy. So when you get pulled into drama, defensiveness, or dysfunction, you're not just reacting in the moment. You're spending from a limited supply. And if you keep spending it on unworthy battles, you'll find yourself depleted for the things that actually matter. The dreams you're building, the people who do value you, the life you want to create. Those things need your energy far more than someone's opinion ever will. When you prioritize your peace, you begin to notice how much noise you were tolerating before. You see the emotional toll that came with constantly explaining yourself, defending your actions, or fighting to be seen. It's exhausting, and worse, it's often fruitless. Because people who misunderstand you on purpose aren't seeking clarity, they're seeking control. They want the upper hand. They want to keep you in a reactive state where they pull the strings and you respond. But when you stop reacting, when you reclaim your energy and walk away, you take that power back. You're no longer playing the role they assigned to you. You've stepped out of their script and started writing your own. Letting go of the need to win an argument doesn't mean you don't have something to say. It means you've realized that some battles are not worth your breath. That your silence, your absence, your forward movement, those are statements louder than any words you could speak. They show growth. They show restraint. And most importantly, they show that your well-being is no longer up for negotiation. You've decided that your energy is sacred and not everyone is entitled to it. Reclaiming your energy also means learning to sit with discomfort without needing to fix it immediately. It means being okay with not having the last word, with not being understood, with not correcting the lie. Because you know the truth, and the truth doesn't change just because someone refuses to acknowledge it. In fact, the more grounded you become in your own sense of worth, the less tempted you are to chase validation from others. You realize that peace isn't found in proving yourself, it's found in protecting yourself. In every argument, you have a choice of, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want to exhaust yourself trying to convince someone who's already decided not to listen? Or do you want to redirect that energy toward building the life that aligns with your values? The answer becomes clear the more you heal. You no longer crave the chaos. You no longer get high on the drama. You want peace, and you're willing to walk away from anything that threatens it. That's not giving up. That's growing up. That's wisdom in motion. And that's the kind of power no argument can ever win. True growth often happens quietly. No noise, no drama, just elevation. We tend to associate transformation with big announcements, dramatic changes, or visible achievements. But real, lasting growth rarely works that way. It isn't loud or attention-seeking. It doesn't demand validation or approval. Instead, it happens in moments when no one is watching, in the late-night reflections, the private decisions, the silent boundaries, and the quiet acts of self-respect that never make it to the surface. Growth is not always a public performance. More often, it's a personal journey. There is something profoundly powerful about a person who evolves in silence, who doesn't need to prove to others that they're healing, changing, or becoming better, who doesn't post about every step, explain every move, or seek applause for their process, because they understand that growth isn't about being seen. It's about being grounded. It's about finally learning to trust yourself, to make decisions from a place of wisdom, and to build a life that reflects who you're becoming, not who you were. The quiet moments are where the most meaningful shifts take place. When you begin to outgrow the people you once thought you couldn't live without. When you start letting go of habits that once felt comforting but were holding you back. When you say no to things that drain you, even if others don't understand, that's growth. And it doesn't need a spotlight. In fact, It thrives without one. Because when you stop performing for approval, you start living in alignment. You begin moving from truth, not fear. You start acting from values, not validation. Most people won't notice your growth immediately. They'll still expect you to react the way you used to. They'll test old triggers, poke at familiar wounds, or challenge your silence. But growth is about responding differently, not loudly. It's about keeping your peace when you would have once chosen war. It's about letting things go that once would have consumed you. It's about walking away without bitterness and continuing to build even if no one claps. And when they don't understand it, when they say you've changed, they're right, you have, you just didn't announce it, you lived it. Quiet growth is sustainable growth because it's not built on pressure to impress or compete. It's built on intention. You're not rushing to prove how far you've come. You're moving in sync with what feels right. And because of that, your progress becomes authentic. It lasts. It grounds you. It doesn't crumble the moment someone criticizes it because you weren't doing it for them in the first place. The strongest roots grow underground where no one can see them. And yet, those are the roots that sustain the tallest trees. Your quiet growth is doing the same. There's also a deep sense of safety in private evolution. You're not vulnerable to opinions. You're not distracted by comparisons. You're free to fail, to try again, to explore without judgment. And when you finally emerge, whether that means stepping into a new season, reaching a goal, or simply feeling more whole, it's not a surprise. It's the result of all the silent work you've been doing behind the scenes. The boundaries you set, the forgiveness you gave, the healing you pursued without needing anyone else to recognize it. People often underestimate those who grow in silence. They assume that because you're quiet, you're stagnant. But what they don't see is that you're evolving in ways that words can't capture. You're developing resilience. You're learning emotional discipline. You're becoming more grounded, more self-aware, more free. You don't need to scream to be powerful. You don't need to declare your evolution. Your life will reflect it. Your energy will shift. Your decisions will change. Your presence will feel different. And that will say more than words ever could. The world often rewards noise. Those who shout the loudest, move the fastest, and take up the most space. But growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to not go back. The silent refusal to tolerate less. The internal knowing that you deserve more. And those quiet moments, they become the foundation of a stronger you. Because while noise gets attention, silence gets results. And the ones who grow in silence are often the ones who lead the most powerful transformations. Not because they told everyone, but because they lived the proof. The greatest power you can ever hold is the power to walk away quietly, calmly, and with conviction. You don't need to explain your worth to those who ignored it, and you don't need to argue with those who refuse to understand you. True strength lies not in how loudly you leave, but in how peacefully you choose to let go. When you leave silently, you are not abandoning others, you are returning to yourself. You are protecting your peace, preserving your energy, and honoring your growth. Let your silence echo louder than any words ever could. Let your life after them speak the truth they refuse to see. Because in the end, the strongest move is not staying to prove, but leaving to evolve.